Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Miller. I am one of the directors here at Zero Hour Student Ministries, where we are awakening and unleashing high school students as everyday disciple makers on their high school campuses. What we long for is to see gospel saturation happen in our city. And by that, we mean we long for every student in every high school to have repeated opportunities to see, hear, and respond to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Um, and in order to do that, it's going to take a miracle from the Lord, and B, it's going to take radical dependence on Him and radical obedience to what He says. And so, what that looks like is a couple of different things, but I just wanted to share some of the rhythms of what our students live into as they're making disciples, as they're seeking to make disciples. And then we'll sort of zoom in on one of those rhythms in just a moment, because that's what we'll focus on. But for now, I just wanted to share what those are. So students are praying for their friends. So extraordinary prayer through just every day praying for 5 people a day. They are relationally investing in their friends through having meaningful conversation that often leads to gospel conversation. And then they're inviting their friends to read scripture with them. If they're showing spiritual openness and are wanting to discover Jesus more deeply, they're reading scripture together through discovery-based Bible studies so that these people who didn't previously know Jesus have opportunities to actually learn about him in scripture. And so these are some of the rhythms that our students are living into. We're going to take that gospel conversation lens and zoom in on that. And what does that look like? So the rhythms, they're not supposed to be a formula. They are just a pathway, in a way that we're seeing God at work in our context. It is highly contextualized to the culture in which we live and the culture in which our students live. So for instance, our students are part of Gen Z and Generation Alpha, where Gen Z is the first truly post-Christian generation in our nation's history. And studies have shown that 3 to 5% of public high school students are even actively living out their faith in some way or claiming that they are Christians. So only 3 to 5% of a public school is following Jesus. Again, in order to see gospel saturation happen, then it's going to take a miracle. And it's going to take students radically loving their friends in a way that makes God's love for them believable. And that's where gospel conversations comes in and why it's so important. So why are gospel conversations necessary and what do they even look like? How do you even get to a gospel conversation? It's easy to contextualize loving people and being a good friend, right? Like we can all agree that we all want to love people well and we all want to be good friends, but it's oftentimes entirely different lived out in your day-to-day life. So in order to make such a big conceptualized idea more tangible to students, we just tell them that a good friend asks good questions. So we're training them to be good question askers. If you want to truly know a person, you're going to ask them questions. And not just any questions, but questions that lead to more open, authentic conversations where you can really share about your lives together. Okay, I often see students get stuck in wanting to know their friends more deeply, but not knowing what to ask. Where it's like, I want to be a good question asker, but I don't even know what the questions are. Like I even remember once myself when I was in high school Googling like icebreaker questions for new friends and then just following that to talk to one of my friends because I just didn't even know what to say. And so the tool we're going to unpack today just kind of gets at that. What are things that people talk about? Again, students and adults too, myself included, get stuck here. We just need to be reminded of different conversation topics to be able to ask well-rounded, meaningful questions that get at the heart of who a person is and what they enjoy and what they're about. And so that tool that we're going to be unpacking is called frog questions. Frog is, we're not talking about the animal, It is just an acronym. So an acronym for natural conversation topics that come up most every day. It stands for friends and family, recreation, occupation, and goals and gifts. So if you're going to ask a question on friends and family, that could look like, hey, tell me about your family. Are you close with them? What's home like? If you want to ask about recreation, what do you do for fun? Do you go to the gym? Do you play a sport? Do you like to read? I have friends that like to knit that I never would have known unless I started asking them what they do outside of school or work, etc. And then that occupation. So do you have a job? Do you like your job? What do you do? And then lastly is goals and gifts. So what are your big goals in life right now? What are you good at? What kinds of things are you passionate about? So these are just 5 conversational topics that come up every single day. And people can take them as far as they want. Like you can go as deep or not deep as you want in that. But these topics matter to people. Obviously, you could ask any question you wanted, but this is just a tangible tool to be thinking through, okay, what do I know about this person's family and what do I not know? Maybe I could ask about it. Similarly, what about what they do for fun, what they do for work? And then what kinds of things do they even care about? Where do they want to go in life? These are all just questions. And the reality is, psychologically, people love to talk about themselves. And so when you're asked a question, it's actually this beautiful opportunity to finally get to share your heart with somebody. And especially in this next generation where loneliness is at an all-time high, it's actually a real need for students to be able to openly talk about themselves with other students. And so we're seeing just real fruit in students asking other students questions that often lead to deeper conversation. But a great place to start is going to be in those frog questions. So I just wanted to share, to close us up, a couple stories of how we've seen this play out in our own context in Kansas City. So firstly, we have a student named Gabe who is a sophomore at one of our high schools. And he has this friend who goes to his school with him that he has just spent the entire first half of this school year just praying for, like desperately praying to God that he would have opportunities to share the gospel with him. And that's not just like a gospel demonstration. So he's living it out. It's not just a gospel presence where he is being a kind person and having the presence akin to Jesus. And it's not just a gospel proclamation. It's all of that, right? Like we want to see gospel saturation seep into this person. So he's just deep in prayer. And then alongside that, he's been asking this kid just good questions to get to know him. That's like, hey, do you go to the gym? I go to the gym. It's pretty fun. We should go together sometime. And then they just kept having conversations that went deeper and deeper. So he was eventually able to ask about his family and things like that, and talk about kind of how home life is. And these are just like, he didn't have any agenda for these conversations. He just asked questions that led to conversation. And slowly he spent that entire first semester building a relationship with him. So he was deep in prayer in the quiet place, and he was building a relationship as he asked these questions slowly over time. And then it got to this point where second semester, it was like the first day of second semester, this kid just texts him, hey, what's the meaning of the cross? Because he had spent so long building that relationship through asking good questions, it became a safe space for this other student to feel safe to ask his friend a vulnerable question. It's through the safe space of a friendship that gospel conversation often arises. And so now they're reading the Bible together. Like this kid who doesn't know Jesus is now discovering him because the Lord was at work in Gabe's heart and causing him to seek God earnestly in prayer and causing him to live in obedience and ask good questions, to where this kid actually was like, oh, maybe this person cares about me, and maybe God's love for me and care for me actually is real. I want to know more about that. And so that's just one story of sweet fruit that we've seen. Another student that we've seen, well, actually, he's not even a student. He's on our 0 hour ops team with us. But we've seen some cool stories happening in him, where with his coworkers, he'll literally just have a question of the day where he'll go in and he will ask some sort of question based out of these frog questions. So those 4 categories of natural everyday conversation topics. And his coworkers love it. It got to the point where when he either wasn't there or when he had forgotten, they would come to him and be like, "What's the philosophical question of the day, Josh?" And he eventually just got to build those relationships and friendships with them over time. And then who knows, like that may open doors to deeper connection further along down the road. But right now, like they are just, Josh is actually getting to live like Jesus and show them that Josh cares about them, and that in that Jesus cares about them too. All right. So gospel conversation and frog questions are not any sort of secret sauce to living missionally. It's just one simple, helpful tool that makes conversation more tangible to people and helps us not get stuck in that "I don't know what to ask" sort of rut. My hope is that you're able to contextualize this to your own places and spaces, so that you would see meaningful conversation and even gospel conversation along down the line in your own places and worlds. And so, yeah, that's my prayer. Thank you so much.